right now, our new slate of winter courses. Starting this week, as part of our Great Book series, we have Aristotle's Politics. Then, soon after that, we will start the history of the Cold War, and that will be followed by our next Great Books course, the Bible. Go to unregisteredacademy.com and sign up now. I'll see you in class. At Unregistered Academy, we are announcing, right now, our new slate of winter courses. Starting this week, as part of our Great Book series, we have Aristotle's Politics. Then, soon after that, we will start the history of the Cold War, and that will be followed by our next Great Books course, the Bible. Go to unregisteredacademy.com and sign up now. I'll see you in class. At Unregistered Academy, we are announcing, right now, our new slate of winter courses. Starting this week, as part of our Great Book series, we have Aristotle's Politics. Then, soon after that, we will start the history of the Cold War, and that will be followed by our next Great Books course, the Bible. Go to unregisteredacademy.com and sign up now. I'll see you in class. At Unregistered Academy, we are announcing, right now, our new slate of winter courses. Starting this week, as part of our Great Book series, we have Aristotle's Politics. Then, soon after that, we will start the history of the Cold War, and that will be followed by our next Great Books course, the Bible. Go to unregisteredacademy.com and sign up now. I'll see you in class. Thought I'd lost you.
No, yeah, what's up?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Yeah, the chat is feisty already.
I haven't even said anything yet.
Yeah. Yeah, today we're supposed to be morally condemning Scott Adams, so don't get mad at us. Today Scott Adams is the bad guy.
Yeah. Scott Adams. So I actually think I need to do something with my sound here just for a second before I rail on Scott Adams. Give me 1 second here. Yeah. Okay. Scott Adams is a racist white supremacist who is a terrible person. And I think, isn't that it?
Yeah, CNN pays the bills right now. So as long as those checks clear from CNN, that's our line. But if Elon Musk starts paying us a little bit more, then we might flip sides.
Let me ask you this, Michael.
Mhm.
What was your reaction when you first saw the Scott Adams rant?
Oh, homie decided to go a little wild on Maine. That's all.
Well, I mean, what was your sort of emotional reaction? What was the expression on your face like?
Same as what I'm looking at you right now.
Oh, with awe and love. Okay. I laughed.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know that's what Hotep Jesus's reaction was too. He laughed at it. And I remember thinking at the time, that's the proper response to this.
There is a Patrice O'Neill bit that I'm going to play that is exactly what Scott Adams said.
Okay. Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. So, why do we need Scott Adams to like black people?
Well, we don't need anybody to like anyone. I think he does like black people. If you actually watched his talk with Hotep Jesus where he clarified his comments, it's pretty obvious he does. He's just making a crass statement about risk assessment.
Okay. Well, I mean, again, it's sort of like, why the outrage? Why is this even controversial? Someone doesn't like an ethnic group or is afraid of an ethnic group or whatever it is. I mean, the right to hate should be in the Bill of Rights.
Oh, dude, we were talking about Aristotle last night in class, and
right.
you praised him for talking about noble hate, which is a novel concept in this day.
I think I was thinking of Scott Adams when I was reading that section of the Politics, Aristotle's Politics. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the sort of untold crimes of liberalism, is that they have since World War II, and there's a very specific history about all this, but there was since World War II, liberalism, which has been the dominant ideology in this country since then, has disallowed hatred and called it, well, particular kinds of hatred, of course. Hatred of rich people is fine. Hatred of Republicans is fine. Hatred of Donald Trump is certainly fine. But hatred of ethnic groups, racial groups.
Hatred of white people is fine.
White people is fine, right? Men.
Hotep was talking about that. Yeah, white men.
Hatred of men is awesome. Can't get enough of that. Yes, of course. So, I mean, as part of their attempt to assimilate all of the world's colors into American culture, they did that. I mean, for a lot of historical reasons we can talk about here. It's also in my course on World War II at Unregistered Academy. But yeah, it's so that's an attempt to repress something that is as common as breathing, practically. I mean, who has not at some point in their life expressed some sort of animosity or dislike of some particular social group? We all have. And so when you attempt to repress that, which is a very, very normal thing, it often comes back in worse forms. In fact, that's what we have seen. I think the rise of the so-called alt-right in 2015, 2016, the frog Twitter, all those guys all those friends of mine on Twitter. Yeah, I mean, that's what they are all about, right? Isn't that entirely what the alt-right and frog Twitter is all about? It's about the return of the repressed, isn't it?
Well, yeah, they say things that you're not allowed to say as you're like, we can't say what frog Twitter is saying with our own faces out there or we'll get canceled. So frog Twitter goes online and goes anonymous and says those things at the ugliest possible version of them.
Well, what I mean is that social phenomenon was entirely a reaction to liberal attempts to repress those thoughts.
Right? Totally. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
That's why those guys started, was because they were told you can't do this. And anytime you establish a taboo, we all know what happens. People want what the taboo is about even more. And that's what those guys did. So I'm not allowed to say things that are racist and sexist. Well, I'm going to go ahead and do that as an anonymous, Twitter account here.
Well, Scott Adams did it with his own face and his own name. And his comic strip, which has been syndicated and for decades now, has been pulled from USA Today and major newspaper distributors because of this.
Right. And so it's the assumption that a harm has been done That's the most outlandish thing. And it's also part of what we've talked about a lot here, the infantilization of American culture, right? So exactly in what world was harm done by Scott Adams saying what he did about black people? Who, I mean, and if any black person watches that and feels harmed, they're idiots. They're just idiots. And they want to be treated like children. Everyone should watch that thing and just laugh at it, because these are things you're not allowed to say. That's what comedy is, right? It's saying the unsayable. And that's what he did, and that's why I found it funny. And he did so in a way that was very, I guess what I found funny was he was very cavalier about it and very relaxed about it, which I thought was cool. Like, yeah, man, stand in your truth. And I just can't imagine caring. Like, even if he were my best friend or my dad, I can't imagine caring about this in any negative way. And the idea that it constitutes a harm to black people or whoever, I mean, I would think, and I you know what, I would bet everything on this. I would bet you anything that if you showed that video to every single black person in this country and took a poll, I mean, what would be the percentage of people who laughed at it, and what would be the percentage of people who claimed that they were harmed by it?
Well,
I mean, come on now.
Yeah. So it all started with this Rasmussen poll,
right?
That he was commenting on. The Rasmussen poll said, "It's okay to be white. Do you disagree or agree?" 53% of black people polled said they agree that it's okay to be white.
Right.
And then I believe it was 26% said I disagree with that statement, and 21% were unsure.
Right.
So he's got a point. And Hotep Jesus himself, when he was talking about when he was talking with Scott Adams directly face to face, was saying, "Yeah, I was raised to hate white people, and that was something I had to overcome personally."
I know. Yeah, Hotep's told me about that. Yeah, many times he's told me about that. Yeah. You know, Kamasi Hill, good friend of mine, who's also been on the show and also used to teach for us. He was raised in a black nationalist family in Detroit, and he told me that he believed white people were evil until he was about 30 years old. Now, these are fairly extreme cases, although I don't think it's uncommon in black families to talk about whites that way. I wouldn't say it's the norm either, but it certainly happens. But here's the point. I mean, the point is that Scott Adams was, of course, right. He's talking about a recent social phenomenon, and we know this from polls over the last, 10 years, right? When we see blacks in America increasingly talking about race relations being negative, more so in the last 5 years than ever in American history, have African Americans said that race relations are bad. Same with whites, too. And it began with not George Floyd. I think it began with Trump, maybe with Ferguson and BLM, but somewhere around there. Yeah, it just tanked, just plummeted. I mean, since Ferguson, basically, we've been told by the media collectively that we live in a white supremacist society. I mean, it's been a campaign by the national media since about 2015, since the Mike Brown, Trayvon Martin cases. And so, yes, I mean, I think it's true that, roughly half of African Americans don't want to fucks with the white people no mo, I guess. And that's fine. Again, do we need them to be our friends? I know if you're a liberal, you do need black people to be friends because it's an essential accessory. But, well, I mean, it depends on what kind of black you have, but it's an essential accessory for any progressive outfit. You have to have your black on the side, and you also have to have at least one gay. So it is important for them to have always a ready pool of black friends, potential black friends. And that's why they watch The View, because I think they can identify some black women in the audience that they can befriend.
Whoopi Goldberg is generally cool, though.
Well, Whoopi's the leader. Yeah, she's the standard bearer. She's who you want. She's who you want to invite over for brunch.
She was really fun, man. She's a great comedian, and she was a lot of fun, like in the early 2000s and the 90s.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Oh, and totally uninhibited. The back then in the 90s when I don't know if you ever heard about this, Ted Danson. She and Ted Danson actually dated for a while.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what Ted Danson's line was about it? Okay, well, we don't have to repeat it here.
Yeah. And Ted Danson on Howard Stern.
Yeah,
Yeah.
about the hallway throwing
Oh
something
shoot!
down.
No, it was Howard Stern was in blackface as Ted Danson,
Oh,
talking about what Ted Danson said about Whoopi. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say it. So Ted Danson said being with her was was like throwing a hot dog down a hallway.
Oh, okay. That's hilarious. I was gonna say, I think Ted Danson appeared in blackface though, at some awards show with Whoopi in the
Yeah,
'90s. I think.
this show has gone off the rails. I just want you to know that.
Mhm.
We need to pull this back in.
Yeah. Everybody go over to Rumble, rumble.com and subscribe.
Quick, run. No, this is just fine, actually. So yes, race relations, I think that's a thing, I guess, has certainly been poisoned in the last 5 to 10 years by liberals. You know, and they're the ones that control the media and the academy, and the media have been telling us, as I said, en masse, that, you know, you and I are racist and everything's racist. And I mean, my God, look at the New York Times and listen to NPR. It's like every other story is about white supremacy. I mean, you would think this is South Africa in 1982 or something. So of course, black people, and then of course the videos of cops has not helped one bit, you know, and that's a whole story. I mean, the effect of those videos, of those police brutality videos on our country, on our culture, on our lives has been immense. And people, I think it's underestimated how powerful those videos have been, but for the negative, unfortunately. Now, I was one back during the Ferguson days who wanted to march in the streets and kill cops, because I thought at that time, back in like 2015, when I was seeing these videos come out, I thought that, yeah, they're hunting black men in the streets. And then it turned out they're hardly hunting any black men in the streets. And if you look at, so the number of unarmed black men killed by police per year in the United States is around 10. And that stays pretty constant. It's about 10 per year. But if you look into, so that's tiny. And, you know, most liberals think it's 1,000. There have been polls taken of liberals, and most liberals and progressives think the number is about 1,000 unarmed black men per year are killed by the cops, when it's actually 10. But it's even worse than that. If you actually drill down into those 10 cases specifically, you look at them, in almost every one, close to every one, I would say like 8 or 9 out of those 10, the people were doing something wildly provocative and dangerous and reckless with the cops, and I would have shot them if I were the cop. Mm-hmm. They're a good shooter. I'm sorry, they're good. And I'm a Mr. Anti-cop, Mr. Anarchist, Mr. You know, defund the prisons not entirely, but largely. You know, I'm that kind of guy. I'm very anti-statist instinctively, but it's just a fact. It's just a fact that cops in this country, by some miracle, given the kind of country we live in, with all these fractions and all these different divisions and differences and different cultures and poor and rich people and all the guns, we have now 1 billion roughly guns in this country. Imagine being a cop in the middle of that. My goodness. So it's kind of remarkable, you know, and you have major pockets of this country that are in particular neighborhoods in every single major city. Every single major city has at least one pocket like this that has been crime ridden since the 1960s, unabated. I live right near one. So I know of what I speak, and I've often lived in or near those areas. So it is actually a miracle. And those of us on the left libertarian side of this issue need to sort of look at that squarely. Camille Foster and I are like the only people I know of who are on this side, who are hostile to the state generally, who have called this out, you know. And I kind of went through a conversion in some ways. Not that I'm now for funding the cops and militarizing them and sending everybody to prison, but I'm sort of figuring it out. We need to recalibrate our position on this issue now, knowing that it's all a fraud. I mean, Trayvon Martin was a fraud. He was a criminal who attacked George Zimmerman. I mean, and there's an amazing documentary made by a guy who's pretty shady. He was on my show, but the film itself is unimpeachable. I mean, it's unimpeachable. There's no question after you watch that documentary that Trayvon was guilty.
Well, not even watching the documentary, but watching the trial. That's what red pilled me on this issue, was watching the trial. And you could see that some of the witnesses were definitely fake, and the real story coming out about what Trayvon was actually doing that day. Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, it's obvious. If you spend 10 minutes looking into it, it's obvious. trying to remember the name of the guy. I think is it Joel Gilbert? Yeah, Joel Gilbert was on my show, so people should watch that interview and then go watch. I forget the name of his video, his documentary, but check it out. Joel Gilbert on Trayvon Martin. Mike Brown turned out to be a fraud too. That was also a big goddamn hoax. You know, the damn Obama Justice Department investigated it, and they found that no, in fact, Michael Brown was going for the gun, was like was fighting the cop, putting his arms in the cop car, trying to get the cop's gun. What do you think's going to happen, dude? If I were the cop, if I were Darren Wilson, I'd have shot him too. Of course, anybody would have. DeRay Mackison would have shot him if he were the cop in that situation. I can go on. There's more and more. There have been a handful of legitimately, clearly bad shootings, or strangulations in the case of Eric Garner. Breonna Taylor, probably, but you know, it's a handful. And also, by the way, and this is what really fucking infuriates me, and then I'll stop ranting, is we have, in terms of atrocities, cases that anybody would consider an atrocity, we have basically equal numbers of white people getting killed in horrific ways by cops completely unjustly. And, you know, I've had many people on this show whose husbands or children were killed by the cops who happen to be white, and therefore no one paid attention to it. The whole way we think about this issue is just whack. And then BLM has never offered hardly any concrete solutions. They did early on. They did offer some ideas for reform, like body cams, which we now have, and that's kind of good, I guess. But systemically, no. We still have basically the same number of people in prison as when BLM started. And let me say that again. We have the same number of people in prison when BLM started, and the same
Say it
number
3 times for Dr. Umar.
Word. And Dr. Umar. And we have the same number of bad cop killings every year too. That number hasn't changed either since BLM started, and BLM is about to hit its 10th anniversary, by the way. They've been in business for a decade now, and they haven't done shit except divide people and make us more racist. They alone, because they have been the leaders in this, made this country profoundly racist. I mean, you know, for the first time since the civil rights movement, we are living in a profoundly racist country. It's not white supremacist, but it's racist as shit, where everybody gets reduced to their race constantly. And yes, in fact, many, many people are denied jobs, and like me, like your homie right here, for being white. I was told that twice, that you cannot get hired for this job as a professor of history because you're white. Sorry. And I'm hardly the only one. So anyway.
Well, it's nice to be in a band with it's not, personally for me, it's nice to be in a band with some minorities, because if you don't book us, you're racist.
Yeah, it's always good to have that card to play.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, so no, the blacks are useful not just as accessories. I take that back. Yeah, they're much more complicated. Yeah, they're also good business. Yeah. They're also good business. Yeah,
they're good at getting grants if you're in a project with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So yeah, I was gonna say real quick. The most cantankerous member of our chat right now is saying what Scott said is dangerous in the same way as what Kanye said was dangerous. Don't be obtuse. And I can grant you that perhaps what Scott and Kanye said was dangerous, but they're artists, and art is supposed to be dangerous.
So dangerous. So some more white people might no longer hang out with blacks. So there might be more and more white people avoiding black people now. So what? I mean, again, dangerous? How is it dangerous?
It's if people don't want to associate with each other, they should be separate. Voluntarily.
Freedom of disassociation is just as important as the freedom of association. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm. And again, I talk about this all the time. George Lincoln Rockwell and Malcolm X met at the table together. Mm-hmm. On equal grounds. The Ku Klux Klan met with Marcus Garvey, and they were able to meet on an even table because they were both like, I represent my race, you represent your race, we have our disagreements, let's work them out.
Well, it was about...
That's an oversimplification, yeah.
Well, it's because they were nationalists. They were black nationalists, and so they had the same agenda, which was to separate the races.
Yep. We don't want to deal with each other. Let's figure this shit out. Yeah.
Yeah, and people forget this very conveniently, that like the Black Panthers were nationalists for a time, not always, but many of them were for a time. certainly Malcolm X was, and certainly Marcus Garvey, and many of the pantheons, in Black History Month had the same idea. They were separatists. But Malcolm, most notably, and he's everybody's hero, but he was for that, and and so that's why he was happy to meet with the head of the Nazi Party.
Mm-hmm. And then one similarity between Scott Adams and Ye on this is they're both divorced kind of publicly and recently. So a theory is they're acting out for attention right now. Oh. And Scott himself has said, hey, I like attention. I did this partially for attention.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you're guaranteed to get it if you say that. But no, again, it's just, I just stand back and laugh at liberalism, and then I'm aghast at it, and I'm pissed off at it. Yeah. But
men should be allowed to express their feelings, and men express their feelings in ways that might come off as racist. And this is one of those ways,
or homophobic when we call each other fag,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Did we just get taken down? Anyway,
I'm definitely demonetized. I don't think we'll get taken down.
It's definitely demonetized.
We get demonetized automatically, no matter what, for even talking about issues.
Yeah, my black scent might do it this time. I don't know. I've never pulled that out before.
I know, man. I wish you read the audiobook of Renegade History. I really wish so bad that you read that.
The slave dialect?
Yep, the slave dialect.
Well, it's funny as hell for those who haven't listened to the audiobook. My publisher, for some reason, chose a Shakespearean actor to read Renegade History. And he does, when he gets to the slave dialect sections, which is pretty long sections of slaves talking, he just goes fully into that character, like as if he's completely unaware of the last 50 years, of like cultural correctness. He talks as if it's Al Jolson in the 1920s. So if you want to hear like some good old fashioned blackface, you can actually hear it in my book.
Mm-hmm. And one more similarity between Scott Adams and Ye is Scott Adams said this explicitly. He said that there is a price to pay for free speech. And what he wanted to do was be provocative so it triggers more important, meaningful conversations. He wanted to explicitly expand the Overton window, and he was willing to take a hit for that. And we should thank him for that and support him in whatever way we can, because the Dilbert thing is losing him a lot of money right now.
Clearly. Yeah. Well, behold, look what we're doing right now. We're having a more interesting and intelligent conversation about this issue, but it's because of Scott. Mm-hmm. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah. I definitely want to play this Patrice O'Neill clip where Patrice made the exact same point that Scott did. Also, Patrice O'Neill, there's Patrice Talk on Instagram and TikTok where they cut up Patrice clips. Everybody should check out Patrice. And then especially his opening Anthony clips where he was talking with Anthony. If you want to hear a black nationalist kind of guy and a white working class racist guy work out their differences, Patrice and Anthony on O&A was amazing.
He was.
I'm watching you. White guys are good for that shit. Y'all are good for that guilty shit. That's your punishment for racism. Guilt. White guys are so afraid to be a racist. I'm telling you. You see a few black guys walking towards you in an area you don't belong in, run. But you can't run. See black guys coming out. I don't want to assume that these young men are going to beat me in my face. I don't want anybody accusing me of racism. So they got to wait to get beat up first before they can even think about running. My advice, run, get home, feel guilty, but be alive. Alive and guilty is a good thing. Because if I see 5 bald white dudes walking towards me, I ain't going to wonder if they got cancer. I'm going to go. Those look like skinheads. I'm getting the fuck out of here. And I'm not going to come back. And even if they pretend they got cancer, oh, dude, no, don't run, dude. We got cancer. We was all coming from chemotherapy classes over here, and they just thought we were strong enough to get hit on. And I'm not running. I'm not. No, because that could be the old cancer hang a nigga trick. I go back. Hey, you guys all right? Get him! Oh, I fell cure for the cancer. Hang on, nigga, John, how the fuck?
Brilliant.
So I've said this for a long time. If you have not watched a substantial amount of black comedians performing, you really don't understand American culture. I mean, there's just from Red Fox and Richard Pryor to Patrice O'Neill and all the rest, Dave Chappelle, all the rest of them. I mean, no group of people has ever been more incisive about American culture, not just race either, but really about the way we live, the way we think, the way we secretly think. They were the first ones to expose the secrets of race relations in this country. And when we all heard it, you know, we had two reactions: was, oh gosh, and then laughter. As I said, like with Scott Adams, when you hear these repressed ideas expressed, it should be humorous, you know? So anyway, but that was brilliant. Yeah. So, but also like the honesty about what really goes on. I mean, I was the first, Kamala Harris and I in Berkeley, California, we were the first school children in the country to be bused for racial integration purposes. And I was in racially integrated schools for 13 years in the Berkeley public schools in the 70s and 80s. And what was the consequence of that for white kids? We got our asses kicked and terrorized, you know, I mean, and this was happening in Boston and New York City, and lots and lots of stories. There are lots and lots of stories of like little nerdy Jewish kids in New York City getting their asses kicked by black and Puerto Rican kids.
Which is why neoconservatism exists.
That's another long story. Yeah, that's why the Iraq War happened. But that's another deep story about Irving Kristol, Bill Kristol's father, getting beaten up by Norman Podhoretz, John Podhoretz's father, getting beaten up by black kids in Brooklyn, and that caused his enduring hatred of brown and black people, which led to him wanting to bomb the Middle East. Long story. Anyway, yes. So that's what Patrice O'Neill is like, giving voice to that. You know, it's like, wait a second. It's not like people, when they talk about race relations, it's as if, you know, there's like Klansmen marching down the streets of, you know, Fifth Avenue in Manhattan and like Wilshire Boulevard in LA. No, in fact, it's often flipped around, where in certain contexts, in certain settings, blacks are absolutely the oppressors. There's no doubt about it. You know, where there's some mixing, blacks are absolutely the oppressors. And I've been in those situations. I've been in those settings many times in my life. So, God.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Let me tell you a local story here. About 2 weeks ago, a local, kind of a semi-local celebrity. She was an anarchist and a big BLM activist, just a big lefty activist in the Bay Area. She had like a series of businesses that were sort of well known. And finally, she had this bakery that was very well known in Oakland. And 2 weeks ago, she was going to her car. I think they were trying to carjack her car. She tried to stop them. They dragged her she got her arm stuck in the door of the car, and they dragged her down the street 500 feet, and she was killed. And then her family issued a statement saying that they did not want any punishment of those who did it, because it would only perpetuate the cycles of racist violence in the criminal justice system. That's what we're dealing with here. Yeah, that's the liberal mind.
Yeah. Another thing on comedians being the first to tell the truth, Richard Pryor, but really Paul Mooney, who wrote for Richard Pryor, but Paul Mooney was one of the first people to really say to white audiences' face, hey, guess what, man? We hate you. And he was so talented as a comedian that like white audiences took it a lot of times. And, you know, to quote Dave Chappelle and the black white supremacist Clayton Bigsby, if you have hate in your heart, let it out. You know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Right. Let's just be honest. And again, if you if you are concerned about racism, and I am somewhat concerned about racism, would you rather hide it and repress it, or let it be spoken? Right. Let's hear it. Let's know what these people are thinking. Of course, if there was an anti-Michael movement out there, Michael Weimer movement, you know, specifically out there, would you want to censor them? Like, would you want to kick them off of platforms? No.
I'm sure there's a group chat somewhere.
Yeah, there might be. Let's look into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, of course you want to know what people are thinking, especially if they're your enemies. My God, it's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of. Again, the infantilized liberal mind at work. So.
Yeah. Okay. So a lot of people are saying that, wow, Thaddeus Russell has really evolved on these issues, Mr. Left Libertarian. This is like a totally different guy than who I saw 5-8 years ago. an issue that really challenges our quote unquote left libertarian biases is what's happening in El Salvador, right, with the mega prisons.
Yeah. Well, so here's my chance to smash the right wing now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I kind of want to throw up because of the responses to that by the right wing. Boy, it's just one tweet after another from right wing accounts when that video or those videos of the El Salvador mega prison for the MS-13 gang were released by the president of El Salvador. He was sort of celebrating this thing and showing the world how badass he is and how he's locking up everybody. So yeah, 60,000 people have been locked up in the last year. And they had to build this massive new modern prison to accommodate all these brand new prisoners, and it will hold 40,000 prisoners. They released the video of the first 2,000 being incarcerated there, being taken into the prison. And it's very impressive, you know, very orderly, well organized. It looks like they're punishing those guys sufficiently. And you see rows and rows and rows of young men, many of whom have tattoos on their faces and heads. And of those, many have the MS-13 logo there, right, tattooed on their skull. Those guys, I'm pretty sure, are MS-13, and I'm glad they're in prison. Now, I don't know for sure, and I really would like this thing called due process, even for criminals in El Salvador. Thank you very much. None of the right wing cares. They don't care. They don't even like ask questions about what got these 60,000 people arrested and put in prison. You know, what process was followed by this in doing this. Well, here's the thing. So the president, Bukele, I think his name is, a year ago issued this sort of new emergency decree suspending constitutional rights within criminal justice. I mean, for criminal suspects, for people who were suspected of being members of a gang specifically. And then they also gave quotas to the cops to lock up as many as they could in a day or a week. And that's what filled the prisons with these people. So you have people being rounded up and put in jails for up to 2 weeks without trial, without seeing a judge, without anything. You have family members, girlfriends, and just acquaintances or bystanders getting swept up and thrown in these prisons too. And you know what? Bukele's actually admitted this. He just said it's a very small number of innocent people who have been imprisoned, but it has happened. Well, I'd like to know exactly how many. Thank you very much. They shaved all these guys' heads in prison, so we don't know. That's not necessarily a gang thing. Yes, there are many with gang tattoos, no doubt. I'm sure most of these guys are MS-13. Don't get me wrong. The results have been awesome. The results have been a radical decrease in homicides in El Salvador. Like, it now is close to an American city in terms of safety, or its murder rate. And it used to be the homicide capital of the world just a few years ago, and now it's like one of the safer places to be. That's fantastic, and I love that. And I hate MS-13. They're among the worst people on the planet. You can make a good argument that MS-13 is worse than ISIS. I mean, the shit that they do. I mean, they're known to break into people's homes and kill their children in front of them, like small children. Like, that's a thing they do. And rape. Same thing with women. They break into homes and rape the women and kill the guy. I mean, it's like unbelievable. Here's another idea besides suspending due process. Here's another idea. You know how MS-13 started? By selling drugs. By selling drugs. You know how they bought all those guns and were able to pay all these guys to be their enforcers and soldiers? By dealing drugs. By selling drugs. Why do they get so much money from selling drugs? Because the drugs are illegal, which artificially inflates the prices by restricting supply.
And force it into a black market.
Yes, and then forcing it and then making it a black market, which only, of course, criminals inhabit. Only criminals will operate within a black market by definition. So you're only going to get the most violent people operating in that market when you make it black. So here's an amazing, weird idea, right-wing assholes. Why don't you decriminalize drugs? Why don't you do that instead? MS-13 would cease to exist. The Mexican cartels you love yelling about every single week would cease to exist. This is for you, MAGA. This is for you, Steve Bannon, Jack Posobiec, all those people. Yes, I love much of what they say about the Democratic Party. I agree with them generally about the Democrats. But on this issue, Trump, Trump is so off. He has never once mentioned decriminalizing drugs. But he goes on and on and on and on about these gangsters, these cartel members coming into our country. He's right about that. They are, because the drugs are illegal and therefore much more expensive, and therefore there's a much bigger profit margin, and it's a black market. So if you're a killer, if you're a stone cold killer, that's the job you're going to take. There's a job for you because of that black market. If you're a stone cold killer, the criminalization of drugs has created many jobs for you where they used to not exist. All right.
Yeah. For all you constitutional conservatives out there, you guys should really brush up on your Bill of Rights, your right to an attorney, right to a speedy trial, your Fifth Amendment rights, all that.
So they're screaming these days about, the First Amendment being abrogated by the FBI and Twitter. Yes, they're right about that. But so if you care so much about that, how about due process? Due process. Do you want? They scream about the January 6th guys getting like Brenda Caserta, who's on our show, who was scooped up completely on false charges and thrown in prison and left there for a year and a half until he was finally acquitted, because he was part of the Whitmer kidnapping alleged plot, right? Essentially like an offshoot of the J6 stuff.
Literally
all the
framed.
J6.
Yeah.
Huh?
Well, literally framed by the FBI.
Literally framed. Yeah. He and all those guys were literally framed and set up and entrapped. Although 2 of them ended up getting convicted and are going to do massive prison time. But not Brandon. I think about 4 or 5 others got off because they were clearly very framed. J6, many of those J6 guys were framed. This, again, and no due process. And also January 6th. This is January. I should have said that on Twitter. The January 6th defendants who've been sitting in that jail for how long has it been? 2 years now? They look a lot like the MS-13 guys in that prison down there, Well, we don't know they're MS-13, do we? And we don't know that those J6 guys staged an insurrection yet, do we? Because there has been no trial, no due process. So is that what you want, conservatives?
Yeah. No, and Bukele is proud that, literally proud that, not that he's being kind of sloppy and that there's some collateral damage happening here. And that's kind of completely antithetical to
If you live in a neighborhood like that, a neighborhood that has gangsters in it, and again, I do live basically in one. I hear gunshots at night quite often. It's like we want 2 things. We want the criminals to go away, and we don't want to get thrown in prison because we are thought to be criminals. That's what happens. Now, a guy who looks like me has a very small chance of that happening too, but there are a lot of guys in this neighborhood who don't look like me, who could get swept up and thrown in prison if we institute what Bukele did in El Salvador. Do you want that, conservatives?
Yeah, and, oh man, I know this is tangential, but as far as like gang identification, that's been used by the FBI to stifle free speech in so many different ways. Like you can't wear a certain color shirt in certain places. And famously, Insane Clown Posse was labeled a gang, and all these juggalos who are just fans of a musical group who happens to have violent language are identified as a gang and targeted by the FBI just because they happen to have a certain tattoo of a guy carrying a hatchet.
Yeah. I'm all for going hard on people we prove to be guilty of murder. Once we prove that they are guilty of murder, go hard as hell on them. The stuff that MS-13 has done, if it's proven that they're guilty, put them in prison for decades. I'm not soft on crime. I'm hard on crime. But I need to know that it's really a crime, that these are really criminals. Don't we all? This is kind of a basic lesson that we were all taught back in 4th grade or something. But all these conservative constitutionalists, as you said, they forgot all about that shit. Bill of Rights, when it serves their very particular interest in locking up particular people. I don't know. I'm not saying anything about their motivations, but it is not a good look. And I do not want to live in a country run by them. Thank you.
But again, to play devil's advocate, the murder rate is going down a lot.
Way down. It's a much better place to live now.
Yep.
That's true. Would it have been possible to have a better place to live in El Salvador without locking up innocent people? Yes. How? Decriminalize drugs. Done.
But let's say you're in a state of emergency, like El Salvador might be with their gangs, and you don't have the resources to deal with public defenders, and you don't have the resources to deal with courts. Shouldn't it be a good idea to just lock up any suspected criminals right now to stop the murder problem?
They don't have the resources. So, I mean, to lock up 60,000 people requires what kinds of resources? I understand they didn't. Well, they built a prison from scratch in less than a year. Seems like a state-of-the-art prison. It's big enough to accommodate all these people. Or, you know what else they could do? They could tell the United States that in return for fostering and maintaining the bloodiest civil war in the history of Central America for about a decade in El Salvador, which gave rise to MS-13. By the way, if you simultaneously cause this horrific civil war in the small country, poor country, while you're criminalizing drugs that are grown all around there, you're going to get MS-13. I'm sorry, but again, the United States of America created that. Oh, also, further than that, you know where MS-13 was founded, right?
Where?
L.A.
Oh, yeah.
It was Salvadoran immigrants founded MS-13 in Los Angeles and then brought it back to El Salvador, but they operate in every city in this country. Yeah. The FBI has these amazing maps of gang locations where every town and city, I'm sure there's MS-13 in Bloomington too, like, or near there. They're amazing. They're everywhere. They were in Salem, Oregon when I lived there. They're in like all the cities. Trump was right. The cartels and MS-13 have really penetrated the American drug market, and they are in this country in large numbers doing really bad things. It is true. But the way to deal with them again is deprive them of that profit, which is to legalize drugs.
But okay, from a practical standpoint, if you're El Salvador, admonishing the United States is not a very practical step.
Sorry, I didn't finish that. Sorry, I meant in the El Salvador should have said, in return for doing that to us and creating this problem, United States, you should give us some resources to deal with this criminal justice problem, which they do have. That's what I would do politically.
Oh, okay. Beg the United States.
That's what I meant. Sorry. Yeah.
Or you could bust them to the United States if you want to get creative. Pull a DeSantis.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it's an American created problem. It is absolutely. People don't understand this. MS-13 is the creation of the United States in multiple ways. In one way, quite literally, because it was founded here. It's American creation, but by policies. By Reagan's policies funding the Salvadoran government in the Civil War in the 1980s, and by criminalizing drugs and enforcing the drug war with military interventions, by funding the militaries and death squads all up and down South and Central America for years and years and years, they created the conditions for MS-13 to arise. And El Salvador, if I were Bukele, I'd say, yo, America, you did this, now help us out. Help us figure this out. And it wouldn't take much to process 60,000 people. I mean, the United States can handle that, at least just in terms of funding. Instead of giving $120 billion to Ukraine, why don't you do that? Give some money to El Salvador to fix their criminal justice system.
Yeah. It is interesting, though. El Salvador is the nation that adopted Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. The guy's very smart and creative and interesting. And I mean, a lot of stuff he's done, I like a lot. I mean, he's not only that, he's been distributing ivermectin to COVID patients since the get-go, since the beginning, I think. As soon as they could get their hands on ivermectin, like, it's distributed by the government to everybody who gets COVID in El Salvador. It's amazing. So he's just like cut through all the bullshit, the globalist progressive bullshit. He just going his own way. And the right wing loves him. But this is not a reason to love him. I don't think.
So, yeah. But, you know, it's interesting to see, I don't know, maybe Yarvin's experiment play out in real time, or the right wing paradise crop up in a bunch of different places.
Yeah. Curtis is probably fine with suspending due process to deal with a problem like that. I would think it's what a monarchy would do.
You said the I word, which got our stream taken down a few months ago, but I think it's safe to say it now. Partially because
right.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Just saying it. I think you said the H word, which is what got our stream taken down.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
But yep. But the lab leak thing is being vindicated, at least in part, by the Department of Energy now. They're saying that with low confidence, but they're they're pretty sure that they have a source saying that a lab leak was responsible for the COVID-19 outbreak.
Okay, so I was talking to Sam Husseini yesterday about this since the episode came out. With he emailed me and said, "Boy, we had amazing timing because we did that. We released the episode right when the DOE made this announcement."
Oh, real quick,
yeah,
to anybody out there, if you haven't watched the Sam Husseini interview, watch that now. It's not getting the numbers that we normally get, I think, because Sam is kind of shadow banned alongside us being shadow banned, and that's one of the best interviews that has done in a long time.
This interview is historic. I'm telling you, if you watch this interview, you're gonna think about the major political events of our time completely differently. And what Sam and I guess, are doing is connecting a lot of these events. There's an incredible web out there that connects everything from the Wuhan lab to COVID to Ukraine to the Ebola outbreak in Africa. It's all connected. Same group of people are responsible for those things. So why on earth, after the federal government of the United States, many agencies for years now have absolutely dismissed and mocked the suggestion that COVID came from a leak in a lab. Now you have the Department of Energy saying they think it actually does come from a lab. Why? What's the politics of this, right? And it's not immediately apparent. Why would they have this sort of about face politically? Because they've been saying, as I said, like adamantly for a long time, and they didn't want to. Well, okay. Here's why. Here's why I think anyway. So what has happened in the last year is that the détente, the informal alliance between China and the United States fell apart because China decided to ally itself 1 week before the invasion of Ukraine to ally itself with Russia. And that alliance has only gotten stronger in recent months. And in fact, just before the DOE announced that they thought it was a lab leak, the foreign minister of China was visiting Russia and announcing that they were no longer going to deal with the West anymore, that their friends were Russia, and that was that. And trade between Russia and China has increased dramatically in the last year. So this is putting China's boot in the ass of the neoconservatives who run foreign policy in this country. And the neoconservatives have responded in kind by declaring China essentially the enemy. They are no longer playing nice with China. The neoliberal hawks, like the Obama people, and the Blinken people, they too were especially nice to China for a long time. But as soon as they turned on them with Ukraine and Russia, they were like, nope, China's done. We're done with them. So the federal government has been officially hostile to China for a year now. So they get two birds with one stone by saying it's a lab leak. Now they have to finesse this. We'll have to see how they play this out because it's all in the details. But they're in the process of framing China for COVID. That's what the Department of Energy is doing. That's what sections of the federal government are doing. They're framing China entirely for COVID, when it was actually most likely a collaboration between the United States and China that produced COVID. If the United States can convince the public that China alone produced COVID, then they are no longer culpable. The federal government, the NIH, Tony Fauci, all those people we know funded it. And they get to kick China in the ass as punishment for siding with Russia. So they get 2 wins for doing this, if they can convince the American people. So this is why journalists have to step up big time right now. And I'm really glad that Sam is doing what he's doing. And I am committed to doing this as a journalist, to working on this story, to investigating it. I'm going to work with Sam and other people. Guys at the Gray Zone are interested in this too and doing really good work on it. There's a handful of us. There's about 10 or 12 journalists who are working on the lab leak thing. We need to make sure the narrative is correct and show that the United States was at least as responsible for COVID, for the lab leak, as China. We know this because the NIH funded the crap out of it, funded the crap out of the Wuhan lab and the specific project that is most likely associated with the COVID outbreak. So that's what's going on. It's a geopolitical thing, as is everything when you live inside of a superpower.
Yeah. Tucker had quote unquote Chinese whistleblower on to like say that this was a like a bioweapon released by China and that China is responsible for this. And the right-wing conservatives are very hawkish on China right now because of this information.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. Right. I forgot about that little piece of it. So yes, the MAGA people who have been trashing tonight, yes, this is also a place where they've been not so good. Led by Frank Gaffney, who never met a country he didn't want to bomb. Frank Gaffney's like the sort of unofficial foreign policy intellectual of the MAGA movement, and he's on the war room all the time. And that's his thing. He wants to take down China. Gordon Chang is the other big MAGA hawk. He's a professor at Stanford, actually, but he's like a super anti-China hawk. Yeah, they want to pin it on China too, although they wouldn't mind pinning it on Fauci, but they want to use this as a pretext for going to war with China. That's that. Or at the very least, some major economic war with China, which wouldn't be good either. Sanctioning China is going to be a tricky thing, though, because it just was shown that sanctioning Russia did not work at all, and they put the hammer on Russia, and Russia's economy is better than ours now. So China's economy, which is so interwoven with the global economy through trade everywhere, that's going to be damn near impossible. So I don't know how they're going to take on China, except militarily, and God help us all if that happens. Mm-hmm. But that's again the problem with the right wing here. And when I say right wing, I mean MAGA. I mean the nationalist populist movement in this country. Yeah, their anti-China animus is dangerous. I mean, they have many good points. They're not wrong about the CCP in general. I mean, I agree with them in general. I hate the CCP. And yes, they've had a tremendous and malign influence within this country, and they have deep tentacles now in all of our cultural institutions for sure. They practically own all of our universities. There's deals between Chinese universities and American universities up the wazoo. I used to teach all sorts of Chinese students because of all these deals they had. But the answer is not to go to war with them. The answer is to get to the bottom of the origin of COVID and find out what it is. And if it is what it looks like, which is a collaboration that went wrong between China and the United States, then you know what we need to do? So in addition to decriminalizing drugs, we need to criminalize bioweapons research, because that's what it was. It was bioweapon research. Let's stop governments from doing that. We won't have COVID again. We won't have a man-made pandemic again. That's the answer. Can we do that? But they don't want to do that either, because they want to have bioweapons to use against their enemies. The MAGA Republicans and the neocons are alike in that way. They want the United States to have a massive military with all sorts of evil weapons because they want to use them, and they want to use them soon against China or against Russia. If you're a MAGA, you want to use them. You want to use bioweapons and nukes against China. If you're a neocon or a neoliberal, you want to use them against Russia. So they're all converging here, and it's not good, and it could get everybody killed.
Yeah, and it's so sad because at the heart of it, the people of China and the people of Russia just want to trade with the United States and get rich at the end of the day. They're not our adversaries like that.
That is all they want. That is all they want. I have never heard of any Russian or Chinese person of any kind who has called for invading and subverting America or Europe or anywhere outside of their immediate spheres of influence. Yeah, they do want to do some incursions into Ukraine, certainly, and Taiwan, most likely. And they'd probably like to have, China would like to have more influence in Korea and Japan, I'm sure. But they've never expressed any interest in having any real, significant. I mean, they do have, yes, I said they infiltrated American cultural institutions, but that's for economic gains, for economic objectives. There's no military objectives there. They want to be strong and wealthy and taken seriously on the world stage so that they can never be humiliated again like they were for 100 years. This is a very important thing in Chinese culture. 100 years of colonial domination by the West, this humiliation that they often talk about. They want to do everything they can to avoid that happening again. So they want to build themselves up, and that's the Belt and Road Initiative is intended to build up the Chinese economy so that it can't be messed with, and build up then their military with that economic power so that it can't be messed with ever again by the United States or by Europe or by anybody else. That's what they want. Clearly, they've been wanting to trade with us since 1970s when we first opened the door to them. Same with Russia. Russia wants to offload its damn oil and gas and sell it. And that's exactly what they were doing in large numbers until we bombed the Nord Stream and put sanctions on them. That's what those people want to do with us. Let them trade. But the neocons and the neoliberals and the MAGA Republicans dominate the foreign policy narratives now. Unfortunately, damn near every American who cares about this stuff subscribes to one of those three schools of thought on foreign policy. And they're all hawks, just against different targets.
Yeah, I believe it was Dr. Dre who said on the track he produced for Nas, Nas is coming. We need to get rid of this East Coast, West Coast bullshit, come together and make some money.
Who's the East Coast and the West Coast in this case?
The West is NATO and the United States, and the East is BRICS.
Oh, come together and trade. Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, and then also in the BRICS update is that we now have Mexico. Mexico has started to make some noises about BRICS. And they're not joining formally yet, but they've made some positive noises about it. The new president, Obrador, and I think others there. And then Colombia.
Real quick, how is NAFTA working out for Mexico?
What do you mean?
I mean, did they have reason to go to BRICS? You know, like NAFTA was supposed to be this big trade thing that economically secured all of North America to be this rock hard alliance. Yeah.
I don't know the rationale here, what's going on in the Mexico, but I do know that across Latin America, this is a thing. So Lula, of course, founded BRICS. Colombia is now talking about joining BRICS. Venezuela, I believe, as well. Several other countries. Pakistan is talking about it. India is a founding member of BRICS. South Africa is holding joint naval exercises off of Cape Town with China and Russia, for God's sake. You know, longtime American ally joining forces with Russia and China. This shit is happening, man. This is happening. We're entering a new world. I see people trying to poo-poo this, but it's unstoppable now. You have Russia and China fully aligned with these other major powers. You know, Brazil and India are not jokes. I mean, they have got a lot of people in pretty big economies. And the combined militaries is fierce, very fierce.
Yeah. So the left is also having an about face about COVID, partially because of the Department of Energy and intelligence agencies giving some credence to the lab leak theory. But, the left liberals, well, just the liberal cultural institution of SNL had Woody Harrelson on. And he had a very interesting monologue. The first 6 minutes was him pretending to be a dumb redneck who's high on drugs all the time, which is a great strategy if you want to tell somebody the truth, to disarm them. And then he set it all up for this joke, which, again, expanded the Overton window a little bit. Just a dumb hippie. I just reading my script.
So of course I'm wondering about the politics of this, because this couldn't have been an accident. I don't think this was like the NBC censor slipping, because NBC, I think of all the major media outlets, is the most intertwined with the intelligence agencies. I mean, they take direct orders from the CIA and the State Department all the time, and the White House.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a tape delay on SNL, but there have been times where SNL, a lot of things have slipped through, some F-bombs, some N-bombs. And
but this was scripted. This was in the script, I think. I don't know.
It's possible that Woody Harrelson had a different script that the writers approved. It's possible. No. So as a wrestling fan, what we're doing right now is we're discussing whether or not this is a work or a shoot. I think Thaddeus, you are arguing that it was a work. I'm saying it's possible it was a shoot.
Okay. It feels premeditated and planned and intended.
Well, Woody Harrelson is a professional actor, and maybe he's the guy who premeditated and planned it, and maybe he had a different punchline set up for that monologue.
Well, he's been on SNL 4 or 5 times, so he won't be invited. Fifth time, he won't be invited back. Potentially. I mean, why would he do that? It's not good for his career.
Norm Macdonald famously, I think this was his last appearance on SNL. This was a year after he was fired. He was invited to come back on SNL, and his whole monologue was not scripted. It was basically him saying, "You know what? A year ago, you guys said that I was so unfunny that I'm fired and I can't work for you guys anymore. Now here we are a year later, and I'm hosting the show. You know what? I thought what it meant was I suddenly became funny over a year. But really what happened is that the show sucks now. He explicitly said this, and that was unscripted, and he actually planned on leaving right afterwards. So there's precedent for this.
But look what happened to Norm Macdonald.
But again, free speech has a cost, and we're trying to see if Woody Harrelson is a soldier.
Don't fuck with the Clintons.
Yeah.
That's all. And they control NBC for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at NBC, its track record with the feds, it's extensive.
Mm-hmm.
So I just doubt they would. Well, I mean, again, Woody could have gone off script.
NBC is owned by GE as well. You got to think about that.
True. Exactly. No, I know. It's the most establishment of all the establishment, you know. And MSNBC, is its offspring. Let's not forget that either, right? I mean, clearly, I mean, they take all their direction from the feds. I gotta think that it represents something of a shift in the official line about COVID. I mean, in the same week, they come out with this, lab leak hypothesis, contradicting their former statements about this. And that had to be very planned out, right? I mean, the DOE statement, I'm sure that went through all sorts of vetting before they released it. And NBC, in this comedian's monologue, I mean, has this moment where they're letting the truth shine out a little bit. But I got to think that they are preparing for these hearings that are happening, because we have, as we're talking, we have hearings going on, I think damn near every day in Congress, led by these MAGA Republicans on COVID, on the lab leak, or on the origins of it, and on the lockdowns and the vaccine mandates and all that. So we're going to learn more and more and more and more. And they have subpoena power, thanks to Marjorie Taylor Greene, who cut that deal with Kevin McCarthy, giving them subpoena power. That was, by the way, a really important thing that Marjorie Taylor Greene did. And we are all going to be the beneficiaries of it. So I think it is an attempt, again, to craft the narrative to suit their purposes in advance of what is coming out, so that when the bad stuff comes out, they can fit it into their narrative or have a counter to that. That's my thinking. I just don't think these things are accidental.
It's also 2 or 3 years too late for it to be really effective. Right. Yeah.
No one cares anymore. No one cares about COVID anymore, except for political people like us. But normies don't care about it. They're done with it. And I don't blame them. They're moving on. They don't want to hear about the politics of it, the origin of it. They just want to get on with their lives and stop wearing masks.
Now, Woody Harrelson did make a decent stand, and he has he's expounded on his comments in other outlets. Basically, if you work for Hollywood right now, like if you're behind a camera or you work on the crew, you still have to wear a mask, and you're still up to heavy vaccine requirements and heavy social distancing requirements. And he says, myself as an actor, I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to be tested all the time because I'm a big movie star, but the people working on the crew still do.
I know someone who was just in Japan, and apparently every single there's a complete mask mandate in Japan, a universal total mask mandate. Everybody's wearing a mask in Japan. And I think that's true for much of East Asia. Yeah, and I saw videos of that, and it just broke my heart. School children, like all of them wearing masks at school, just horrendous. Some people love it.
So, yeah, dude, that's the thing that almost turned me into a domestic terrorist was watching school children wear masks longer than anyone else.
Me too.
Yeah.
It was the thing that most infuriated me about the whole debacle was what they did to kids. I mean, closing down all their activities. I mean, even closing down the playgrounds and then making them wear masks. I mean, I'll never forgive them for that.
Yeah.
I'll never, because I had a son. I mean, my son was in the middle of that. He was like 17 when it started. So he suffered from it. Missed 2 years of college.
There's a lot of kids out there who don't feel safe. Very young kids who still to this day do not feel safe without wearing a mask. They feel like the air is poison. They feel like they need it to be safe.
I'll never forgive them for that.
Yeah.
For getting it in the heads of these poor kids that they're in danger all the time. It's either climate change or COVID's going to kill you, kid. Enjoy your life.
Okay. To make things a little lighter, do you know about the movie that Woody Harrelson is promoting?
No.
It's called Champions. And I saw this as an attempt by Hollywood to kind of win back Middle America, because Middle America hates Hollywood now, pretty
I hope so.
obviously.
They
Yeah.
should.
Mhm.
It's
But
mutual.
yeah, but it looks like this is going to be a pretty politically incorrect comedy. The plot is, I think he's helping a team of special needs basketball players try to make the Special Olympics, and it's supposed to be a raunchy comedy. And I don't know. Apparently, some people think that the Special Olympics is funny.
I do.
Yeah,
I always have.
Uh-huh.
Am I allowed to say that? I won't use the R word.
Yeah.
But it's my mother actually, when I was a kid, worked for one of the major residential homes for, then they were called, I think, mentally retarded people. This was in the 70s. I knew a lot of those people. I knew a lot of people with Down syndrome. I went to summer camp with them, and guess what? They don't care. They don't care if we make fun of them. They don't care. They really don't care. It's the dumbest thing. This was kind of like the leading edge of liberal sensitivity training, was, can't say the R word because those people are going to be offended. It's like, no, they're not. They really don't care. So I'm glad. I'm looking forward to being able to finally laugh at them again with this movie.
Those videos, I was showing them in school where, like, it's basically somebody with special needs holding up it looks like a hostage video. Like, they're reading a script and saying, when you say that, it hurts my feelings. Like, and it just looks like a hostage video. It's hilarious.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Liberals make all their chosen victims to be sock puppets, right? They make them say these things, or like, we just sort of assume that they think these things. They really don't. They really, really don't. No one is offended by being called an R. Mm-hmm. I promise you.
Yeah. I've got one more Patrice O'Neill bit on this exactly. Again, Patrice Talk on Instagram.
You ever try to watch the Special Olympics and try not to be uncomfortable because it's the right thing to do?
Boom. Oh my God.
But the 10-meter stumble, it's a little watch. You try to, you do, because you're a good person. On your marks, it said go. They fell. And he didn't fall, but what's this guy doing? One day he didn't fall, but he didn't run because the starter's pistol scared him to death, so he's just standing there. You gotta shoot at his feet to make a move or shove him. Now you gotta watch out because the javelin guy is running all around with a pointy stick, and he's gonna run all over you happy, and he can stab you right in your chest with that stick and hit you. And if he hits you in your chest, you can't even go, asshole, you stabbed me with a stick. You gotta go, oh no. No, it's just so in my chest.
Genius.
Yeah.
Yes. Everything he said was right. Mm-hmm. R.I.P. Patrice O'Neill, man.
Yeah. And for everybody out there, Champions, if you want to laugh at the Special Olympics, Champions in theaters March 10th.
Yes, I can't wait.
Yeah.
Get my popcorn.
So, yeah.
We are so done now. We're done. Today has been a massacre. We're just done, man.
So, man, we got to talk about the Zelensky clip that also went viral.
Let's do, because I always love hearing him talk.
Okay.
Every time I hear Zelensky talk in public, I feel like 20,000 more Americans not wanting to send money to him.
Yeah, true. And this is the clip where he basically confirmed our worst fears. I don't think Americans are going to fall for this, and I don't think even Biden is going to fall for this.
But this is going to backfire big time. Yeah,
it's good to hear it straight from the horse's mouth on this one.
Yeah.
If it happens so that Ukraine, due to various opinions and weakening and depleting of assistance, loses, Russia is going to enter Baltic states, NATO member states, and then the US will have to send their sons and daughters exactly the same way as we are sending their sons and daughters to war, and they will have to fight because it's NATO that we're talking about, and they will be dying, God forbid, because it's a horrible thing.
So is that out of context?
No. That's very Zelensky. That's very typical for him. It's too bad we couldn't really hear his voice. His voice is so comical. I really wish his voice were broadcast more often. But everyone, if you get a chance, go listen to him give a speech sometime. It's quite hilarious.
He sounds like Gavin McInnes's impression of a creepy immigrant.
He does. Yeah. So he's technically correct in a way, I guess. So if Russia invades a Baltic state, which that's an open question. I have not actually seen evidence that they're really interested in that. They might be. Yes, because those are NATO members, according to Article 5 of the North Atlantic Treaty. The United States, every other member of NATO will be obligated to come to the defense of that state, meaning go to war with Russia. So technically he's correct, but what he's really doing is just trying to shame America into giving him more money and more weapons and then ultimately more soldiers. I can't imagine any American family wanting to send their son or daughter to Ukraine to fight in what's being called a meat grinder right now. And the slaughter that's going on the front lines, by the way, around Bakhmut, all across the Donbass, but especially Bakhmut. I mean, the reports are hundreds of Ukrainians per day are dying still, hundreds. There was, I think, 2 days ago in Bakhmut, 350 Ukrainians died in a 24-hour period. So yeah, please, Volodymyr, go ask American moms to send their sons to that. Sure. Good luck, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this went viral. All of our people who we agree with on foreign policy were sharing this like crazy and saying,
right,
death before dishonor is what they said. My ancestors died fighting Nazis, and I'm not going to have my sons die fighting for Nazis in Ukraine.
Yeah. I mean, and again, it's like we are fighting for Ukrainian autonomy and independence. Are those the words of someone who's independent and autonomous? I mean, all this is done is shown how much of a puppet state Ukraine is, that everything they do is utterly dependent on the United States, not NATO, the United States specifically. And, they don't call any major military shot without the CIA signing off on it. They are clearly dependent on our money and our weapons. I mean, the government can't be funded. We're now funding the government operations. Their basic operations is being funded by the United States. We just gave them $5 or $10 billion just to work their government. So, yeah, it's a puppet state, and that's what we are fighting for. That's what we are paying money for, and that's who he wants to send our sons and daughters to die for. Yeah, American imperialism, baby.
Man, the war in Ukraine isn't I mean, Putin has a high approval rating, but there's a lot of dissent in Russia about the war in Ukraine, especially as it drags on and actual Russians are having to serve. And
there's two kinds of dissent. So there's the minority liberal opinion, which is mostly based in St. Petersburg, which has always been a very Western city. They're anti-Putin. They're pro-NATO, pro-West. They say what the New York Times says about this. They're a significant group in Russia, but they're a minority for sure. The bigger opposition to the war is not the war, is that they're mad that Putin's not going hard enough. They want more. They want to send more troops in, more tanks in. They want to be more aggressive. They want to take more territory, and they want to win sooner. Most importantly, that's actually people don't realize this, but Putin is actually considered a moderate in Russia, and he is often considered kind of a squish. Like he's actually considered to be sort of too soft in general by a lot of people in Russia. Nationalism is really powerful. I mean, Dugin, who was on the show, was on Unregistered, Alexander Dugin, it's not clear that he has any direct influence on Putin, but he does represent a major strain of thinking in Russia. There is a powerful nationalist current in Russian thinking, and people who are nationalists in Russia, they want to go hard because they don't want to kill their own boys anymore. So, yeah, it's
Yeah.
awful. Also, a month ago, I mean, in terms of public opinion, it's been said over and over again, the Ukrainian people are united in wanting to fight this war and win it. And they're in it to the last. Well, last month, what Zelensky just did? He just, once again, he tightened all of the criminal justice regime around desertion. And they're now rounding up people in the streets and sending them to the front. There have been many reports that teenage boys who are 16 and 17 years old are being drafted and sent to the meat grinder on the front lines. We have now, I think the number is 9 million people have left Ukraine. I think it may be more than that. Actually, it's probably more than that, but at least something like that since the war began. So every one of those who was an able-bodied man is technically a deserter. So we're talking about millions of deserters, millions of Ukrainian deserters, men who chose to walk away rather than fight in this war. So exactly how popular is it among Ukrainians? I'm not so sure. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, for a year, these videos have been traumatizing me, and I'm not sharing them because they are traumatic, and I don't like to share that out in the world. But those videos where people get, what is it, shrink wrapped or
against the poles.
You see, dissenters and deserters in sometimes sub-zero temperatures, saran wrapped to poles, like telephone poles. Right. And they have their pants pulled down for humiliation. And this is done by the Azov battalion and the fighters in Ukraine to keep morale consistent. And it's done to humiliate them, and heaven help you if you try to help them, because then you're seen as a traitor and it might happen to you. And these are the people fighting the war in Ukraine for Ukraine. It's
right.
Horrific.
Right. This is also the country that was ranked consistently for many years the most corrupt country in all of Europe. And this was reported on by the Western media until the war started, when they had to change their narrative. So that's who we're sending this money to. And that's who Zelensky wants to send our sons to fight for and die for.
We're running out. Something I want to bring up, I just learned this week. You were talking about deserters. Do you know this about Mark Twain? Do you know that Mark Twain served in the Civil War on the Confederate side for about a couple of weeks, and then he deserted?
No.
Yeah, really interesting story. Yeah.
Wow. Mark Twain was also a leader of the Anti-Imperialist League, which formed in opposition to the Spanish-American War in 1898. And that was really the very beginning of the American anti-war movement. Those are our godparents, that group right there. Mark Twain was the leader of it. Great man, great, of course, writer, but he had great politics too.
Yeah. So yeah, there's been a lot of censorship. Roald Dahl is one of them. Ian Fleming is the most recent one to have his work butchered by sensitivity experts. And everybody should read up the edits that they make, because really, it's just colorful language. It's just beautiful, colorful language that they're taking out. Nothing too offensive. It, again, reveals a lot about the censors more so than it does the author. But Mark Twain was the first victim of this. And the inclusion of the N-word in Mark Twain's writing, like Huck Finn and Tom Sawyer, is really interesting, considering the politics of it. A lot of people excuse it by saying he was trying to expose how racist the South was, but also he was kind of doing it to rub it in the face of the North and to irritate Northern Puritan sensibilities.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, there really hasn't been a more brilliant writer in American history. And also, again, if you have politics anywhere near mine, he's your guy. Always very skeptical and cynical toward the state, toward authority, toward power generally. No romantic notions of great presidents or great generals or noble wars, none of that stuff, right? He saw the world very clearly. And yeah, he was not interested in expanding, Northern beneficence and good thinking to the South. At the same time, he was, very critical of the South, the old South, the new South, slavery, segregation, all of it, the stupidity of racism. And he really saw it, I think, as stupid, just a very dumb way of thinking about people, which it is. Yeah, Twain was the man. Yeah. And to butcher that man's work, to change it at all, is just gross.
Yeah, Huck Finn might have called his friend Jim by his full name, but Huck Finn was also friends with Jim.
Well, I mean, he traveled down the Mississippi River with Jim. Like he camped, he slept with Jim. I mean, yeah. I have actually, for a long time, I've wanted to like write a screenplay for a movie based on Huck Finn, in which two teenagers, two teenage boys escape from the United States by floating a raft down the Mississippi River, then going over the border into Mexico. I think it's a great like motif and theme. Escaping, because that's what they were doing. They were escaping essentially America.
Mm-hmm. That's
what the river represented. It represented an escape from their society, their civilization, right? And I think a lot of us need to do that in one way or another. We need to escape where we're living from. If it's not physically, then at least, spiritually, we need to get out of here.
Kelso in the chat saying we should do a course on Mark Twain. That'd be fun, man. He's our hero for real.
I dig it. Mm-hmm. I love that. Thank you, Kelso. Great idea. Yeah. Let's write that down and do it. I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, all right. Well, anything else?
We talked about Ian Fleming. That's pretty much it. I do want to say, since we played those Patrice clips, Mark Twain was kind of the first stand-up comic in a lot of ways, right? Because he did these lecture tours where he'd talk about political issues and atheism sometimes. He'd read his books, and he'd be one of the first people to go up in front of an audience and just talk and be funny and talk about controversial things in a funny way. He invented this American art form in a lot of ways.
No, that's true. Yeah, in fact, I actually saw a one-man performance. This was many, many years ago of I forget his name. I think it was Mark Russell? It was somebody like that who was like, he was imitating Mark Twain, and he was actually doing that. He did a whole set imitating Mark Twain giving one of his talks back in the turn of the 20th century. Yeah, it was really amazing to see that. You're right. That was the invention of the stand-up form.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. So, yeah.
Before
started here.
Yeah,
it was definitely American. It was definitely in the United States where that was. People don't realize this. The rest of the world's not funny.
Yeah,
people, you can't find stand-up comics in any other country. Mm-hmm. Hardly. I mean, there's a few. Even the UK. I mean, there's a handful of them who are good, but it's just nowhere near what the United States. It's one of the most interesting things, right? Why has the United States produced so like 90+% of stand-up comics? And comedians in general and comic actors, all the best ones come from the United States. They're all Americans. I need an answer to that.
I've
never figured that out, why that is, but it's something.
I have a friend here who hasn't been in the country for too long, and he's become a fan of Trevor Noah. But really what's going on is he has discovered the art of stand-up comedy. And Trevor Noah is talented and has some good jokes, and he is smart in a lot of ways. He's worldly. He's from South Africa. If you
never noticed.
His Daily Show stuff is crap, but his stand-up can be funny in kind of a Russell Peters way.
Okay.
But I'm, my instinct is to say, oh, you're a stupid normie liberal who likes Trevor Noah. But really, my response is, and what I've done is that I'm happy for you for discovering the art of stand-up comedy. If you love Trevor Noah, you'd love Russell Peters, and you should really check out Patrice O'Neill, Richard Pryor, the greats.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should, I was thinking during this, I want to play clips from like Richard Pryor from the old classics, because I have a lot to, and I'm sure you have a lot to say about those guys, and they had a lot to say about our society that we live in that is relevant to today. I mean, I'm telling you, we could show some clips from Richard Pryor, Red Fox, Bernie Mac, George Carlin, of course, Lenny Bruce, of course, but that would be amazing to sprinkle some of the clips from them into the show.
Yeah. I'll be hunting for them.
Okay, cool.
Sporty Hip Hop on Instagram is the page I follow that has John Witherspoon clips, Richard Pryor clips, just classic comedy clips.
Nice. Mm-hmm. So let me say something about Unregistered Academy and what's happening right after this, and then we can go. So we just released a new slate of courses. As we mentioned earlier, we just started the Aristotle course. It's Aristotle's Politics, which is part of our Great Books series. We did Plato's Republic a few weeks ago, and this is the second installment in that. And then we will soon, in a few weeks, be teaching the Bible, which is another part of the Great Books, which I can't wait to teach. And I used to teach at Columbia University. And then we have a 4-part webinar on the history of the Cold War. which again, I'm very excited about. And that's going to cover a lot of Russian politics, Russian history since 1991 as well. We're not going to just do the Cold War. We're going to sort of talk about the antecedents of what's happening now. But everybody's very interested in the Cold War these days, and there's a lot to be interested in. So I've taught that subject for many, many decades, actually. And I can't wait to get back into it. So go to unregisteredacademy.com and check out the courses that are coming up. And then we have this very big and growing catalog of streaming video courses that you can see right there, that once you become a member, you can stream anytime. And it's for a very, very cheap price, monthly price. Very cheap subscription to get all this content, all these courses. And again, it grows every week. We add a new course basically every week. So you should get on board and go to unregisteredacademy.com and see us in class. And if you want to see Michael and me right now after this and hang out with us and talk with us, go to patreon.com/unregistered, become a patron at any level, and you will get the URL on the Patreon page for Unregistered Live, which is our live weekly meeting with patrons immediately after Unreported every Thursday night. So there it is. Go to patreon.com/unregistered, join at any level, and come hang out with us. Michael, phenomenal. I think this is my favorite episode so far.
Yeah, we were rolling. A quick note. We do have a calendar page now.
Yes.
So we're a real school. Every real school has a calendar page.
That's right.
And also, I believe Cold War is actually before the Bible.
Yeah, it is. Sorry, I did say those out of order. I was just talking about the Great Book series.
Yeah, all good.
Yeah.
And
all good, guys.
Yeah. And this is the thing where I say something nice and my masculinity makes it uncomfortable. But Thaddeus Russell is many things, but before everything else, he is a world-class historian and a world-class teacher, and our best content is on unregisteredacademy.com. So,
okay, fine. No homo.
Yeah, no homo.
Thanks, man.
Yep.
See you on the other side.
See you on the other side.
Bye.
Bye. Finding the outro music. Here we go.